Now to discuss is former Undersecretary of Defense and former Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Robert Wilkie, somebody who I love to talk to on this, and I really appreciate your insight, Secretary. So it's great to see you. Thanks for coming on Sunday Agenda today. So real quick, I want to get your thoughts about OPEC. I don't know if you heard the reader at the top.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that seems, it seems to be very good for the Trump administration and a good sign. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. But look, I'm talking to the expert here, and thank you for having me on about Russia. If oil, which is now, Ural's oil is now sitting at about $45 a barrel. If that drops to $40 a barrel on the world market, and with the Saudi move, it certainly will, Putin has more arrows taken out of his quiver. He cannot sustain a war economy when oil is that low. We've always had it in within our means to do that by Trump unleashing American energy on the global market. But with the Saudis doing this, it shows that Putin has done more than overplay his hand in Ukraine. He's overplayed his hand in the Middle East. He's been chased out of Syria. And now, because of his support for the Iranian regime, I think the Saudis are finally saying enough of this, and they have the means to further increase Vladimir Putin's predicament.
Seems to me that was more than likely a topic of discussion on the sidelines, out of the public and media view during the president's most recent trip to the Middle East. Talking about the ongoing war. As I mentioned, both sides are expected to meet again face-to-face tomorrow in Istanbul. I was in Istanbul during the last face-to-face, the first time both sides met in 3 years, a couple weeks ago. Look, that's good news. I mean, it's going in the right direction. There are very low expectations in that first meeting, as I mentioned. What was it, like 2-3 weeks ago in Istanbul? We weren't expecting an end to the war, but both sides, what came out of that, as you know, both sides agreed to release 1,000 POWs each, and at this point, I think they've released about 850. They're on track to do that 1,000. But really, I don't think we're going to see an end to this until there is a summit between Putin and Trump. And that was the hope, and the hope the last time around. I don't think we're going to see that this time, but really to get it done, there has to be that, right?
Well, Zelensky has absolutely no reason to concede to the Russians right now because Ukraine is not losing. Last night, the Ukrainians launched a massive drone attack on 5 major Russian air bases and destroyed 41 long-range bombers and fighters, reminding the Russian people that Putin's special operation is not going well. And also, Putin has only managed to claim in 3 years of this fight just 50 extra square miles of Ukrainian territory at the cost of 900,000 Russian casualties killed and wounded. So he's now in a predicament of his own making. He's flubbed his nose at President Trump when 2 offers of ceasefire have taken place. Look, I think the only way this happens, there are 2 ways. One we talked about, and that's the crippling of the Russian economy. And the second is if the president has had enough of Putin's lying and killing, and the spigots for American weapons open up and get to Zelensky. I think those are the only things that are going to make Putin say enough is enough. But he staked his whole regime on this, reclaiming the Russian Empire. So he has done this to himself, and it's interesting from an intellectual perspective to watch him try to wriggle out of this mess.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought up the Ukrainian attack because I meant to mention that, and it just proves that the Ukrainians, they still have power. I mean, they still have the ability, smuggling in drones across the border in vehicles, according to some of these reports, and then launching that massive attack shows they have the SBU has the capabilities and they're using it. And then with OPEC, all of this kind of fitting together, do you think this will be enough really to push Putin to have a sit down, to have a summit with President Trump? And when do you think that could potentially
Well,
I mean, if we're looking
I
at the
think,
crystal ball, when could that potentially
yeah,
happen?
yeah. I think what happens if the president signals to the Russians, again, enough is enough, and I have the ability to make the Ukrainians whole in terms of their own self-defense. That would mean to replenish their air defense stocks and also flow the arms, artillery munitions, precision guided munitions, the things we did in the first Trump administration that kept Putin in his box. The other thing is that Putin has awakened the Europeans in a way that I know he never calculated. And I think as the Europeans begin to gear up, as they begin to send more money and more tanks and more artillery pieces into Ukraine, Putin's got a terrible dilemma on his hand. I think, and you're the warrior. I'm just the intel analyst. I think he's almost reached the point of what we would call the culmination point, when his forces have just run out of gas, and being on the defensive as the Ukrainians are, that gives them a tremendous advantage, and they don't have to expend as much energy on the attack. They can absorb what the Russians are throwing at them, and right now it's just massive human wave after human wave because they've run out of tanks. He doesn't have any armored vehicles to send into the fight anymore. So the OPEC decision, Trump's hard line, cripples the Russian economy. And the last thing I'll say, I forgot to say this, Trump has the ability to crack the Russian banking system, as he did in the first administration. And
Right.
Putin has to know that that's hanging out there as well if he doesn't come to the table.
Yeah, and what really stood out during my last trip to Ukraine, the drone war, the Russians are coming up with these FPV drones, the drones that have the cable connection, the fiber optic cables, but the Ukrainians are countering with new technology as well, and we are seeing the result of that in this latest attack. Secretary Robert Wilkie, again, really always appreciate your insight. Great to see you. Thanks so much.
It's always good to be with you.